Hello and welcome to this OCI Cloud Coaching session. My name is Florian Bonneville. I'm a member of the OCI Compute Domain Specialist team at Oracle. Today, we will explore the process of migrating your current instances to the new E5 shapes. This guide will outline the steps to successfully complete the migration across various scenarios. Back in 2021, we launched our AMD E4 shapes using the EPYC Milan processor. These were a big step up, offering up to 15% more performance than the previous E3 shapes, and even double the performance of the Intel X7 shapes. Then, last summer, we introduced the AMD E5 shapes, based on the EPYC GENOA processor. And these were even better, doubling the performance of the E4 shapes for our bare metal instances and improving VM instances performance by up to 32%. And what is really exciting is that even with all these improvements, the prices for E4 and E5 shapes are pretty close. In fact, when you look at what you're getting for the price, E5 shapes are an even better deal. This great balance of price and performance is why our customers are moving to the latest E5 shapes. Now, let's see how it goes in the real life using the OCI console. Let me show you some instances I have in my environment. So here you can see I have 3 instances. The first one is a Linux instance created in 2022 and running on E3 shapes. The second one has been created in 2024 and is using an E4 shape. The last one is a Windows server created in 2021 and using an Intel shape. So the Gen 1 shape on Intel. And we will move all these instances on the latest E5. But before doing the migration, I would like to check if the hardware hosting the new E5 shapes is available in my region. To do so, I will use a script I published on my GitHub. This Python script will help you to get a report and to see if the latest hardware is already available in the region, if we're currently deploying, or if it's not available at all. You will find this script also in our GitHub repository, and we will show you the link at the end of this session. Let's go back to the OCI console. To run my script, I will use the OCI Cloud Shell. Let's put it in full screen. I already downloaded the script locally, and I will run this script. I will use some argument as described in the documentation. The first one is for the authentication. I will use the Cloud Shell authentication. I will look for a specific shape. I would like to know if the shape named vm.standard.e5.flex is available in a specific region. Here I would like to check EU minus Frankfurt minus 1. Okay, so for the Frankfurt region, I can see that every availability domain and every fault domain already have the E5 available. That's fine. But I also have instances deployed in other regions, as you can see. And I would like to see if this hardware is also available in the other region in order to do also the migration, or if I have to wait before planning this migration. So I will reuse the script and I will just remove the region argument. Now the script will connect to all the region I subscribed, and for each region will give me the report. If I check Amsterdam, it is available, that's fine. It's also available in Stockholm, in Mumbai, in Paris, in Frankfurt, in Dubai, that's fine. But it's not yet available, for example, in Abu Dhabi, because I can see here hardware not supported. Usually that means we are currently deploying this hardware, so it should be available soon, but it's not yet available. That's fine. I will wait and I will relaunch this script later when the hardware will be available, and I will start my migration in Abu Dhabi. That's okay. So let's close the Cloud Shell. So let's start with the simple instance created in 2024. Before doing anything with an instance, it's always a best practice to do a backup. As I said, this instance is very simple. I do not have any attached block volume. I only have a boot volume attached. So I will start with this boot volume, and I will go to the boot volume backup, and I will create a boot volume. Let's say backup for the boot for Linux, and it's Linux 2024. And let's create the boot volume backup. Okay. While it's creating the boot volume backup, let's go back to the instance. Okay. Before editing this instance, in order to move to the latest E5, I will show you what we have inside this instance. So let's connect using a shell. And let's see what we have. First, let's check if I have some data. Yes, I have some data on this boot volume. That's okay. Let's check what is the CPU. It's the AMD EPYC 7th G13, the one used by the E4. I have 8 threads, so 4 cores, that's okay. That's clear. And let's also do something else. Let's save the MAC address of this instance. We will see later why it is important to check this. Let's check if config grep it here it here text. Okay, thanks to this we saved it locally. We will check after the migration if it has changed or not. Let's disconnect from this instance and go back to the OCI console. So this will be an in-place migration. We will migrate from E4 to E5 using the same shape, and we will not modify anything. That means we will keep it public IP, we will keep private IP, and we will also keep the MAC address, as we will see after the migration. So let's start with more action, and we will edit the configuration of this instance. Let's click on Edit Shape. This is an AMD with 4 cores and 64 GB of memory. I would like to move it to the latest E5. I can reuse the same amount of CPU and memory, or I can use something else. Let's double the performances, and we will use 8 CPU and more memory. That's fine. Let's save the change. Very important, be very careful when you edit an instance. The instance must be rebooted, at least for the time being, before being able to move to the latest E5. So be careful if you are running in production environment, or if you have application running on your instance, the instance will be stopped and will restart to move to the latest E5. So let's reboot the instance. Okay, it is now stopping, and it will restart in a few moments. You can also follow the migration step using the rock request. As you can see here, I can see that the instance is updating. I can see, yes, it is completed. So we will be able to connect to the instance. Yes, the instance is running. Sometimes when you resize an instance, after the first boot, you will not be able to connect immediately to the instance. This is because we can have some update at the OS level. So even if the hypervisor, the OCI console is showing this instance as running, you will not be able to connect immediately. This is absolutely normal. So don't worry about this. Do not restart the instance, at least not before the first 5 minutes, I would say. It can take 1 or 2 minutes before you can connect. If you want to see what's happening to this instance, you can also connect to the console history, and you can view the terminal if the instance is really running, if it has completed the restart, and so on and so on. So don't worry, just wait for 1 or 2 minutes and then connect to the instance. Let's see if the instance is available. Let's connect to the shell. Okay, it's ready. So we still have our data. Let's check the MAC address first. Let's see if it has changed. Right here. Okay, we still have the same MAC address, so we kept the public IP. I didn't change the public IP to connect to this instance. We kept the private IP and we kept the MAC address. That's okay. And let's check the CPU. Okay, now we are running on the AMD EPYC 9G14, okay, the one used by the E5. We now have 16 thread, so 8 physical core. This is our new configuration, so everything is fine. My new instance has been migrated to the latest E5 and is ready to use. Now let's talk about another instance. This instance, as you can see in the name, has been created in 2022. If I click on the image name, you can see in the image name that it has been created in 2022 also. So before we launched the E5 shapes. And if I go to compatible shapes and I look for all the shapes supported by this image, you will see that there is no E5 available. We have the E2, the E3, the E4, but we do not have the E5. So we will not be able to do the migration so easily. Let's go back to compute, instances, and our instance. If I try to do the migration, clicking on edit, edit shape, AMD, okay, E4 is available because E4 has been created after before, so we create this image, so that's why it's available, but there is no E5. Let's cancel. So to do this migration, I will have to create my own custom image, and I will edit this custom image in order to add the compatibility for the E5. Again, this is an application. I have some application running here, so I should create a backup of my boot volume and my block volume if I have before doing the migration. I also have some specific things, I would say. I have attached a block volume. There is a block volume attached to this instance using EPYC. So I will have to manage and to deal with this block volume. And if I check the VNIC and the IP addresses, let's see what we have. Okay, you can see I have public IP. This public IP is a reserved public IP. That means I will be able to reuse this public IP after the migration. This is very important. We will talk about public IP just after. And I have this private IP, and I would like to keep also the private IP. We will see how to do this. Let's go back to the instance detail. And again, before going to the migration, let's check what we have inside this instance. So, as I said, this instance is running on E3. It has been created in 2022. I also have some data. Okay, this is the data I have on my boot volume. If I check the volume attached to this instance, you can see that I have this block volume attached, and I have my mount point here. If I go to the mount point, let's check the data inside this block volume. Okay, I also have some data. Okay, a lot of stuff here, so I would like to keep also this data. Let's clear. Let's check now the MAC address. The MAC address is there. Okay, we saved the MAC address. And the last thing is, let's check the CPU. Okay, here I can see that I'm running on the AMD EPYC 7742, the one used by the E3 shapes. This one has 16 threads, so 8 physical cores. Okay, this is my current configuration. Okay, so let's clear. As I said before, we will create a custom image. That means we will reuse this custom image, but we have block volumes attached to this image. So before creating the custom image, let's remove and disconnect the block volume before creating the image. So let's start with sudo uant /nt data, and now let's check. Okay, no more mount point, but I still have the block volume attached. Let's switch to the OCI console, attach block volume, and let's get the iscsi command to disconnect the block volume. Close. Fast. Let's check again. Okay, no more block volume attached to this instance. We are ready to do the migration. Let's disconnect, go back to the OCI console. Now we can detach this block volume. Okay, the block volume has been detached. So now we can create the custom image. So we go to the More Actions button. We click on Create Custom Image. Let's use a new name. Let's say Custom Image Linux. It's 2022. And let's create the custom image. Be very careful when you create the custom image, because to create the custom image, OCI will first stop your instance in order to capture the data. So the instance will be stopped, and after capturing the data, it will restart the instance. So be very careful. If you are working on production environment, you have application running and so on, be aware because we will stop and restart this instance. So let's wait for this custom image to be created before proceeding to the migration. Okay, my instance is now running, so that means the custom image has been created. So I will just keep the private IP. Let's go back to attach VNIC, Linux, IP address, and I will just keep this public address because I would like to reuse this public address. But to reuse this public address, I will have to terminate this instance. This is the only way to free a private IP. The public IP, because it's a reserved public IP, could be detached from this VNIC and could be reused for my new instance, but the private IP can be detached and reattached to a new instance. So I created a backup for this instance. I created a custom image, so I can now terminate this instance. I can also keep the boot volume if I want. So I will keep it and I will terminate this instance. So terminating the instance will free the private IP, both the public IP and the private IP. And after the instance is terminated, we will be able to create our new instance running on E5. So let's terminating it and let's check on the custom image what we have. We have our custom image just created. If I click on the custom image, again, I can check the compatible shape. Again, here there is no E5. To add the E5 support, I just click on Edit Details. I will use the filter. And I will say, okay, I would like to add the support for VM standard E5 Flex for this image. I save the changes. Okay, so now I will be able to create an instance on E5 with the same image. I can go to, let's check before if the instance has been terminated. Yes, it is. So let's go back to custom image, and I will create the instance from the custom image. We'll use a new name, let's say Linux. It's always the 2022, but now it is on E5. It has selected my custom image, that's okay. I don't want to use the E4, I want to use the E5. Previously, I think we used 8 of CPU. We can use 8 or we can change again. Let's say 24. I can also enable a new feature, like I would like this instance to be a burstable instance. This is not mandatory, but this is possible. So for the demonstration, let's also enable the burstable mode. Okay. And select. So we have our new configuration. Now, if we go to the VNIC information, I would like to use the same subnet, that's okay, the same VCN, but I would like to reuse my private IP. So let's put the private IP here. Okay. This is the previous private IP. I can ask for a public IP, but I don't want, because I will reuse a reserved public IP I previously created, the one that was attached to the previous instance. So let's remove it. We can keep it and change it later also. Everything is possible. That's okay. About the SSH keys, I don't need any SSH keys because it is already included in my image. I will not attach the block volume right now. I will do it after the migration. And let's create the instance. So, instance is provisioning. While it's provisioning, I will go to the VNIC. click on the VNIC name, scroll down until IPv4, and you can see, okay, this is my private IP. I will use the same, and I would like also the same public IP. I will click on this three button, edit, and I will say, okay, I would like to reuse a reserved public IP I created. It was this one, so I can use it. Because the previous instance has been terminated, this reserved public IP is available. Let's talk about the public IP quickly. By default, when you create an instance in OCI, the public IP are ephemeral. That means if you stop an instance, maybe after restarting, the public IP could be different because it is not reserved for you. If you want to always have the same IP, the same public IP for an instance or to use for all your instances, you can create some reserved public IP. To do so, you go to Network, Reserved Public IP, and from here you can create your reservation. As you can see here, this is the public IP we're using for our instance. I can see it is assigned to my instance we just created, and I have another one. This one is available, for example. I can give a name to the public IP, and I have this IP already available for me. I can create another reservation. I give a name. I say it can come from Oracle. Okay, don't need. So thanks to this reserved public IP, that will be easy to create, delete, and recreate instances, and always using the same public IPs. So this is very useful instead of using ephemeral IPs. So let's go back to this instance. Okay, this one has been terminated. This one is now running. So my new instance using the previous data, the previous boot volume, has been migrated to E5 and is using the same IP address, same public IP, same private IP. Now I will have to reattach the block volume. Let's select my block volume. I want to attach it using EPYC, and I will attach it. Let's wait for OCI to attach this block volume to my instance. Okay, now let's connect to this new instance. We didn't change the public IP. I will copy it. Let's use this profile. And let's see if it works. Yes. Let's zoom in a bit. Okay. So first, let's check our data on the boot volume. We have the data on the boot volume. That's fine. Let's now check the MAC address, the previous one and the new one. And as you can see, it's the same because I didn't use the right IP address. I'm a bit stupid. Let's use this IP address. And do it again. Apply. Connect. Okay. Now we have also our data. Okay. It's Okay, now let's check again the MAC address and the new one. As you can see, we do not have the same MAC address because we created a new instance, and when you create a new instance, you create a new VNIC. So you have a new MAC address. So we are able to keep the same public IP, we are able to keep the same private IP, but we can't keep the same MAC address. Most of the time, this is not a problem, but sometimes you can have an application using this MAC address. So be careful when you do this kind of migration. The MAC address will change, and maybe you will have to update some data on your application if it's using the MAC address. That's clear. What about the CPU? Now the CPU has 48 threads, so 24 physical cores or CPU, and it is now running on the E5 processor AMD EPYC 9G14. So everything is okay. Last thing to do will be to reconnect the block volume. Let's switch to the instance. Block volume, excuse command, copy the command, close, switch, past. Let's clear. Let's check. Okay, the block volume has been reattached to this instance, and it's already mounted to my /mnt data. It's okay. I have my data, the same data, I guess. Yeah. So everything is okay. My instance has been migrated successfully. But during the migration, I forgot something before creating the custom image. As you can see here, I have a block volume, and this block volume has been attached automatically to the instance. And I forgot to edit etc fstab in order to comment this line. In this case, it has worked correctly, and I have not been blocked by or during the boot of this instance. But before doing this kind of thing, it should be better to go to fstab before creating the custom image, comment the fstab line, and save it, and then you can create your custom image. And if you want to prevent this kind of issue, it should be also a best practice to put a password to your root account, because by default neither the root account or the OPC account have a password. And that could be very useful to have a password, because if the instance doesn't want to boot correctly and you want to access this instance, you will use the console connection mode here, and you will launch it from the Cloud Shell or from your local laptop, for example, in order to get access to this instance. You will get the access, but if you do not have a password for the root account, you will not be able to log in, and that will be a problem. So think to create at least a password for the root account for this kind of issue, and that could save your life. Okay, so this instance has been migrated successfully. If I go back to my instance, it was running on E3, as we can see here. It is now running on E5, like the previous one. we had some block volume attached to this instance. They are also available in this new instance, so everything is okay and everything is ready. So now we can go to the last one. The last one is a Windows instance. So a Windows server running since 2021 and using a Gen 1 Intel processor. And we would like to move it to the AMD E5. If we click to the image name, we can see, okay, this is a Windows server created in 2021. And if we go to compatible shape, there is not a lot of things here, only Gen 1 with dense or without dense I/O. So no E5 available. Let's switch to the console, disconnect from this one, and connect to the Windows instance. Okay, this is my Windows instance, very basic. Let's check the CPU. Okay, this is an Intel Xeon, so the generation used by the Gen 1 OCI standard 1 shape. Everything is okay. Now we will do the same thing. We will go back to the instance. I should create a backup again and again. Always create a backup. Nothing specific. Okay, so now I will go to more action. I will not edit this shape because I know I can't edit this shape to move to the E5, and I will create a custom image. Custom image, let's say custom image Windows from 2021. Again, the process of creating a custom image will stop my instance and the instance will restart after. So let's wait for the custom image to be created. Okay, so my instance is now running. The custom image has been created. That means I don't need this instance anymore. I can terminate it. I will keep the boot volume, but I can delete it if I want. Terminate. Let's go back to instances, custom image, and now we can see we have our new custom image for Windows 2021. Click on it. We click on edit details, and we will add the E5 shapes, and we save. Let's go back to compute, instances, and now I will create the new instance using this button, create instance, Windows. It's always my 2021 image, but it's on E5. I will change the image and I will select my own custom image, and this is this one. Select the image. Yes, this is an image created on Gen 1, Gen shape. Go to AMD. I added the support for E5, but not for E4, so that's why it's great. Click on E5. Previously, I had only one CPU and 7 GB of memory. But now I would like to increase the CPU and the memory. I could use also burstable mode, and I select the shape. That's okay, nothing else to do. Normally, I don't want to reuse the private IP in this example. So I will let OCI assigning a new private IP in my VCN. Same thing for the public IP. I will get a new public IP because the previous one was ephemeral. Okay, nothing to do. No block volume attached to this instance. And now let's create this instance. Let's wait a few minutes. Okay, so the instance is now running. Would like to connect to this instance. Let's go to the attach unique IP address. And let's take the new public IP. And let's switch to the console properties. Okay, so I have access to my new Windows instance migrated on E5. Let's check the CPU. And we successfully migrated to the AMD EPYC 9G14, the one used by the E5. We have our new configuration. So this instance has migrated from Intel Gen 1 Standard 1 to the latest AMD E5 processor successfully. Let's disconnect from this one and go back here. So we completed this session. We successfully migrated 3 instances. One instance is created in 2022, running on E3, has been migrated to the latest E5. One created in 2024, created on E4, has been migrated on E5. We saw how to keep the public IP and a private IP. We saw also that MAC address will change if we create a custom image and create a new instance from a custom image. And we created a new instance based on the data we had on the Windows created in 2021, but running on Intel Gen 1, successfully migrated to the latest E5. So, session summary. During this session, we learned how to verify the availability of new shapes in a specific region using the script provided in my GitHub repository. We also covered the process of upgrading a shape from a previous generation to the newer one, and how to manage previous images that do not support the new shape. It's important to remember that resizing or updating an instance and creating a custom image will always result in the instance being rebooted. It is recommended to stop the instance before creating a custom image, especially on Windows. Terminate the previous instance if you want to reuse a private IP in order to free this private IP. Think about using reserved public IP if you want to keep your public IP when you delete or migrate an instance. It's important to note also that the MAC address will change when you will create a new instance based on the custom image, for example. And last thing, always back up your data before applying any change. Thank you for watching.